So I am currently writing an article on the best teams in the world on each specific map. So I thought I would go ahead and do a recording, which I'm going to try to release simultaneously with the article about like just rating systems in general. I guess the main two that people would think of or look at when talking about CS:GO is the one Thorin does and the one HLTV does. Now, I guess the first place to start about this is like when people bring up rating systems to use as a way to seed tournaments, they always want to say, well, those are always going to be slightly flawed, so we shouldn't use them because people are just going to complain about why X team should be higher or lower than a different team. So that's like a detract. So if you complain about a tournament not having seeding, then it goes to seeding, but then you're getting played still. So that's sort of annoying attitude. Well, the obvious problem with that is that a seeded system, even with flaws, is going to be better than an unseeded system. But the second part of this is that there's always going to be a flaw to the system no matter what you do, which is completely true. I was just thinking about this concept about the flaw, and I think what people don't think about when they think about trying to create like a ranking system is this notion of how teams are actually ranked in these systems. They're ranked based on results, right? Which is the obvious thing to do. I wouldn't do it any other way. This is how my little system is going to be done for this article. That methodology of using using results to determine rankings, I think it has to be flawed in some way. Because if you think about how you'd actually decide whether a team is better or not, or how good a team is in like a 1 to 100 sense, or exactly measuring how good a team is, you wouldn't use results at all. You'd try to break it up into a multitude of factors, maybe skill of each individual player on a team, skill of a team on each map, the skill of tactics on maps, miscellaneous factors like maybe Verse Pro tends to do well at high stakes matches, or Astralis or something, or a team like Astralis in the past tends to not do so well in high pressure matches, right? So these sort of factors, and that you use all these factors to determine how good a team is or isn't. Results are like a weird proxy variable to how good a team is. The idea is that the better team will win a match. So by knowing that Astralis is better than Optic or VP is better than Gambit, and then using several results, VP is better than this team, VP is better than that team, VP is better than another team, you sort of get an idea of how good this team is. And you can go more specific, like maybe the better team this round or the better player in this kill. But you have to think, well, of course, not always the better team wins, but like over time, the results show you who's better generally, right? But that's a approximation, right? That's not an actual. The better player isn't who gets the kill in this one round. The better player just aims better. It just is better. You're using a result to qualify the actual skill. You're not inputting the actual skill itself into the ranking system or the model, right? So that's what results are, and that's so using results, I think, is always going to be fundamentally flawed. I mean, people want to say that CS:GO has some randomness to it, which is, I mean, which is true to any game, I guess. Like if a player is in a smoke and another player is in a smoke, and who sees the other first can be sort of random, or if it's a 1v1 in a big map like outside on train, where there's lots and lots of angles, it can be sort of random in that sense who gets the kill in the end, right? If you don't have any information. So, I mean, there's some randomness to that. So results aren't going to be perfect. But, I mean, results obviously are going to be the best tool, the best measuring device of actual skill. But the whole thing is that results aren't skill; they're approximation, and these approximations aren't going to be perfect. So that's sort of like this fundamental flaw. And there's this other argument I think people bring up a lot when they talk about ranking systems, and that's the idea of whether or not to do like a subjective system, like deciding which team is better based on criteria, or a mathematical system where you sort of weigh each result but numerically, and then your system, your spreadsheet, or your formula will just give a number, and that'll determine who's higher than another team. So that this sort of works nicely in CSGO because HLTV uses a numeric system while Thorin's system is more subjective. The argument that always goes down is that people say, well, the numerical system is better because it's not subjective and it's not prone to human error. But then the comeback is always, well, when you create that system, your criteria, your way of setting it up is obviously also subject to human error. So both systems are always going to be imperfect. And I think I hear this all the time, that people think that HLTV's ranking system is pretty bunk. And I think generally it's pretty decent. I'll mention an article, like it's just a quick way of showing like how good a team is. HLTV uses this. HLTV ranks this team this number, or Thorin ranks this team that number. So it's decent, but I think there's some problems. I think the way they do it, I think, overvalues recency from what I've seen. That's just sort of my general impression. And then the way they do it, where like if a player leaves the team, that just detracts the significance of a result. I think that's sort of weird. So it's not a perfect system, but the idea that a numerical system is better inherently because it's unbiased is sort of unreasonable, from my opinion. You have to have a perfect set of criteria and factors, which in itself is impossible because of this idea I was saying before, that results are just an approximation of actual skill, actual potency within the game. So yeah, the whole idea that a numerical system is better than a more subjective system is sort of bunk to me. And then the other thing too is I think people underestimate how much subjectivity is actually involved in a subjective system like Thorin. So the one I'm trying to do in this article, I'm going to be releasing around the same time as this audio recording. Once you set the criteria, in the mind, you have to give weights to things. Like, is a win versus Navi at, say, IEM Oakland better or worse than a win versus Liquid at the same tournament? Well, I'd say those two are pretty much the same. I'd count them the same as my mind. Right? But maybe then you get something more difficult, like, is SK with the XK lineup with Fox, is that better or worse than a team, say Optic or FaZe? It's something, these are pretty equivalent. If teams have very similar results, but the final result, or they have like exactly the same results, and the final result is a win over SK with Fox, and then the other team has a win over Optic with Stanislaw, maybe say at like an ECS Season 2, around that time. I give it to Optic there, but it's closer. Optic never played SK. Optic had that thing where they sort of played the same teams, FaZe, Astralis, Cloud9 a couple times, while they didn't play all these other teams, SK, Virtus Pro, NIP over the same period. So, that could be sort of challenging. And then Optic, of course, had the bad result at the major and then broke up immediately afterwards. So it's sort of hard to tell how good Optic actually was, I think, and how to weigh that. So it can be confusing in that sense, and that's sort of where your own subjective opinion as an analyst or a thinker comes into play, right? But it's I think, if you're just being reasonable, it's really hard to say, like, if you look at one team's set of wins versus another team's set of wins. I think in general, it's fairly obvious. It can be close, but you'd obviously just sort of specify that it's close in your article or in the sort of the paragraph reasoning section, and then sort of give your reasoning for why you think one team's set of results are better than another team's. So I think there's very limited subjectivity in actual subjective ranking. But yeah, I guess I'd go through the last part about this would be talking about like my specific rules, how I think a subjective rating system should go. I haven't thought about how to do a numerical system. That'd be maybe a fun exercise for later down the line. But I just sort of, for this article, for this recording, it just sort of be relevant, I think, to talk about why I picked all of my criteria, and then sort of go through why I think that criteria should be in place in that specific way. So I'll just look at my article now. I already have all this done. It said, no, the first rule is that the value of a specific map win will be evaluated with respect to the strength of the opposing side. So that, so a win versus Virtus Pros could be more valuable than a win versus King Win, right? That's very obvious. You want, a win isn't just a win. You also have to look at the context of the win. This is very obvious, right? The second thing, which I think is a little bit more tricky, is I actually have that a map win, because this is talking about, my article is talking about specifically which team is better on which map. I say map wins in a best of 3 series will not be weighted differently than a map win in a best of 1 series or matchup, right? So that was kind of tricky, because you think about it, well, a best of 1, if it's a best of 1, the whole outcome of this matchup is determined on the best of 1 map, where a best of 3, you have 1 map to lose, 1 map to play with, but you can just win the other 2. So in some way, the best of 1 is more significant, but in other ways, usually best of 1s are like group stage games, and people tend to care about those less, and they're early in the tournament. And there's this other thing where people say that the first map of like a best of 3 is always sort of the weakest one played. So best of 1s sort of like have this, it's just people aren't warmed up yet. So people would say that's generally not when you see the best Counter-Strike, which I think is perfectly valid. But yeah, for the broader Tarkin general rating systems, like the idea of best of 1s and best of 3s is usually how much more significant is a best of 3 to a best of 1. You'd obviously put more weight into a best of 3 to a best of 1, but I don't know exactly how you do it with them numerically. What you do is twice as relevant, like a series win over Astralis in a best of 3. Is that twice as significant as a best of 1 win versus Astralis? That'd be sort of an interesting thing. I think I would count it as do that exact thing as I just said. I'd do double. But yeah, I haven't actually thought about it till just now. It's 3 times as many games possibly, but you only have to win 2. And if you win 2-0, yeah, and I actually did a rating system a long time ago, maybe 6 months ago, where I'd ranked North American teams. And what I say is like a 2-1 is going to be counted the same as a 2-0. But I actually did the opposite on a loss. Like an 0-2 isn't going to be counted the same as a 1-2 because you actually won something. I guess that's true. Like if you win 2-0, you're winning on your MAC pick and the other team's MAC pick. That's more significant than if you win on your own MAC pick, lose on another team's MAC pick, and then win a third game on a more middle MAC pick for both teams. A MAC pick of more equal strength. Yeah, that's, I think I just do double. Would I count 2-0 more than 2-1? That's an interesting question. I think, yeah, I'd be interested in the comment section if you guys have a opinion on that one. I think I would count it. See, there's this thing later, Rule 5, where I talk about this, where I say a 16-2 win, a win where you don't give your opponent a lot of round wins, shouldn't be weighed more heavily than a game where it's like a 16-14. And I really believe that because like I think people give too much weight to a an almost win by another team. Like, oh, Misfits, they didn't win versus VP, but they got 12 rounds. Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. They still lost. They still haven't. Yeah, I think, like, you can't give, if it's 16-14, you can't give, or VP, like, 55% credit and the other team 45. Like, VP, or the team who won, should get all the credit, and the team who lost, like, a loss is still a loss at the end of the day. Yeah. See, that's tough. I think, I think in a specific map, I wouldn't count it, but it might be worth counting, like within the confines of of a specific map. Like a win or loss should only be the value counted rather than how many round wins. But when the contest for the best of three match, would I? In the subjective system, I wouldn't detract from it. Would I do the same thing as I did before, where a best of a 2-1 is this weighed the same as a 2-0? Yeah, I think I would do that. I think that makes sense. Horseshoes and hand grenades, that sort of thought process. You shouldn't give a team too much credit for still losing. But yeah, because you don't take negative values for losses, I don't think you would treat a 2-1 more significantly more differently than a 2-0. Okay, so I guess that's sort of that conundrum. Which leads nicely to this rule 3: losses will not have a negative effect detracting from a team's accomplishments. But in this specific system, I'm actually going to count overall record. In a normal ranking system, talking about which team is best generally, not on a specific map, I wouldn't include record because just the way best of threes work, like I talked about before, I wouldn't like win rate overall. Just generally doesn't mean much to me because if you win series 2-1 all the time, that's your win rate's only 66%, and then the best of the ones in the group stage aren't always super significant. So your win rate could actually be pretty close to 50%, but you can still win tournaments. I mean, fairly close to 50%. You couldn't actually be at 50%. Probably, right? It had to be some weird format. Yeah. Okay. So like, I think that makes sense. Like, every rating system I've ever seen doesn't detract negatively for a loss. Now, when you think talking about maps, like, yeah, if you have 4 really good wins, but you also have 4 really good 4 losses to the same teams of the same caliber, it makes sense to question how good are you really on those maps. But for a general rating system, yeah, no one would count negatively because then attending more tournaments, if it would, like, okay, say if you do 2 first places and a last place, then it'd be like you've only won 1 tournament because you take the negative would subtract the positive. The do poorly at the last tournament would subtract the good tournament. But I mean, you won 2 tournaments, you accomplished all these things. I don't think that should be like eliminated because that thing happened. And you did triumph over those teams. And then, like, what if a team, like the same sort of team made second at both those first 2 tournaments but didn't attend the third? Like, they're just getting rewarded for not risking it. Like, that way you could just do like really good at 1 tournament and nothing for the rest of the year, and you'd be the best team maybe than a team who's like Virtus.pro, who's like more up and down, like a tournament win, a second place, then like a low group stage finish, and then like a middling 4th place finish. Like, maybe the team who just won the tournament completely would be higher up. So it just doesn't make sense to have those negative values, I think, generally. But when talking about specific Maps, yeah, it obviously makes sense to look at overall win rate. I think that's as logically consistent to have that separation because yeah, you don't need to be good at all maps to be good as a team. But like if you're talking about strength on specific maps, you got to talk about win rate. Like if you're talking about win rate for a team, like all these maps you're not good at, you're forced to play. Maybe you have a really good five map pool, but bad at two maps, really bad at two maps. Your win rate's gonna be like 66% in series, right? Because the teams are just gonna pick your really bad maps. But you're actually a really really good team. You're pretty much unbeatable in a best of three. If you're the best team in the world on five maps and absolutely terrible on two, right? You'd still be the best team in the world, but your win rate would not make sense. But if you're looking at specific maps, the win rate would obviously account for something. Okay, and number 4 is online results will not be considered. Yeah, this one some people have a problem with. I see people arguing sometimes like whether or not you should count online results or how valuable those are. And here's my general sort of rule of thumb I use when I think about this. I think most people agree with me on this. It's not that online results are completely useless, that they have zero predicting power. It's that they have very limited predicting power because of several factors. Speaker's advantage, odds being stronger online, like times where teams have high pin because maybe like it's a situation with Pimp where he's not an American but he's playing on an American team and he's home in Denmark when they have to do a qualifier, so they have to play with him with a high ping, and that sort of really hurts his ability to perform right. So that's another example. There's also times where you think teams are playing more cavalier because it's a less important game than a LAN game, and there's also not the pressure of the crowd. At your home setting, you might be able to perform much better because you're extremely comfortable with your setup, where LANs are always more variable in that. It's about being good under pressure and being good in a variety of circumstances, right? So it's not that online results have no significance. It's just that it's saying it's always Counter-Strike. It's just the significance is lessened, right? And you wouldn't want to compare online results on par with LAN results because they're too different. I would say they're too dissimilar from one another. And you can think of all these crazy results that happen online that would never happen, or you would assume could never happen on LAN. Like right before Luminosity, who later became SK, won MLG Columbus, like the week before that, they lost in the quarterfinals, I believe, of an iBuyPower Cup, one of those seasonal iBuyPower Cups to, like Selfless, who's, I don't know if, I think they have won like a game offline, but they've never left a group stage. They always look really bad. There was that period sort of in the first half of the year where they were consistently attending LANs, but they'd never actually do anything at the LANs once they get there. And even if their style wasn't considered like online, or they didn't have like players you would consider online, they just couldn't transition from online to offline. So this win over Luminosity in the iBuyPower Cup was completely ludicrous. Like this, Luminosity was about to become the best team in the world, in part thanks to injuries to other players, but like the fact that they lost to Selfless there is not indicative of the strength of either Selfless or Luminosity online. So to count online results, I think, is sort of a fool's errand. Now, if you're going to make a numerical system instead of a subjective system to count online results to some degree, I think makes sense, but you'd have to very much limit the value of those online results. Like maybe an online win is worth a fifth of an offline win. I mean, I think you need to use online results if you're rank below like top 10, going to top 20, even top 30. Then you have to use more and more online results because those teams aren't going to be attending offline events. But I think, yeah, it just doesn't make sense to weigh online results that highly because it's a different game and it's very variable. And you see all these results like the Selfless one I mentioned that are just, completely out of touch with the reality of offline play. So, yeah, I already talked about the fifth rule. The sixth rule I think is an interesting thing to talk about. I say like a roster changing organizations don't affect rank. And I think ESL use a weird system where that actually does because it's like they think that the prestige of the org is going to affect how well the team's going to do. It's like the structure of the organization provides is going to affect the teams. I think in some way that might be true to a very limited degree, but I mean I wouldn't. That seems like a very weird thing to consider. I think they value it like really highly, like 50% or something crazy like that. But I haven't that I only remember hearing about that a long time ago when they first introduced that system. I don't even know if that's still going on, if that's how they still see tournaments or what. But yeah, that was sort of a very odd decision. The other thing I think is I talk about in Rule 6 is a roster role will be divorced from their past results if a member of their roster changes. Now, when I originally did the North American ranking system, 1 to 10, I actually had it if two players change, right? If a team changes two or more players, then I'd consider a different a team. And I think I did that out of convenience because North America over a long period has a lot of roster changes, so you'd have to discredit a lot of results if it was just a one person change. But with just more experience and thinking about the game more and being around the scene more, it just makes sense to me that a single change should be what should reset a team's results. Because whenever you even change a single player, it has these dramatic ramifications in the performance of players on that team and how they do and how their roles work and how that team performs. I think if you look at Astralis right now, that's a perfect example with Glaive coming in for Kerrigan. And you wouldn't think maybe okay, Glaive's a better fragger than Kerrigan, but you would have to say that their in-game leading might be of a similar quality, right? So you wouldn't assume a massive increase in Astralis, but I think it just worked out. I don't know how specifically worked out with the person. Maybe it was something with the personalities or the roles. I mean, you can do a more thorough investigation with that one. But you know how this single change has massive effects on a roster. I think that happens again. Another thing with Kerrigan and FaZe. Automatic to Cloud9 is another good one that increased the level of the team dramatically and also increased Automatic's own level. So these things sort of happen, and I think I was underappreciative at the time last summer of how much a single roster change can affect a team's results and their identity, right? So that's why I have that rule there. And then I say a stand-in results with a stand-in will not be considered because that's a different roster, right? So yeah, you'd obviously wouldn't. That's a single person change again. So you wouldn't consider those results. Okay, and then my last point. I put this last in my 1 through 7 because I think it's the most open to interpretation or your own personal preference. Is that I have I count only results within the last 100 days. And I picked that specific time metric, 100 days. And I think, yeah, this one's sort of very arguable. What time measurement should you use to rank teams? Results from what period of time is relevant? Now, what HLTV uses is they use, I think, 3 months, and then they each result gets less relevant over time. So a result from a month ago might only be worth 50% as a result from yesterday, right? So that's, I think, a reason why I think they sometimes I do think that's a reason why I think recent results are overweighed. Yeah, if you're ranking a team I would keep all the results with in that 100-day period as like the same value. Well, that kind of will lead to swings because like a really good result will just fall off the time period, and then like a team, like if that's a really good result, like it will drastically shift or reposition a team's worth within the order. But yeah, if you're ranking, if the conceit of the rating system is you use like a time period, you're not measuring what is the best team right now. You're measuring what's the best team in this time period, in this 100-day time period, 3-month time period. So to decrease the relevancy of results based on how far away it is from the present doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me. Sense to me. Now, if you're gonna do like a power ranking, that makes more sense. But yeah, yeah. So that's why I wouldn't do it in this ranking system. But yeah, if you're doing something where you're talking about who's the best team right now, not the best team over time, I would yeah, decrease the relevancy of results based on how close it is to or increase the relevancy of results as it gets closer to the present, right? But yeah, the thing about having like a very pointed, like who's the best team at this second, that's sort of like a weird, like I always see that complaint in threads talking about Thorn's rankings, like, oh, it should just be who's the best team right now. It doesn't really matter who's the best team of the last 3 months. That's always sort of a weird argument or like standpoint to me, because then you would just look at the results of the last tournament because that's the absolute most recent. So by that, you'd say like Astralis is like the 4th best team in the world, which makes no sense because they just lost in the quarterfinals or semifinals of DreamHack Masters Las Vegas, right? So there'd only be 3 or 4, the 3rd or 4th best team in the world. But I mean, yeah, that's you just look at the results of the last tournament and just be 1-to-1 who's better than who, right? Now you'd have to like look at it and decide like who's the 3rd place team and who's the 4th place team, and maybe there's some sort of computation there, but it doesn't make any sense to me. It just seems like too simple. You just look at the results of the past tournament. So now on why I picked 100 days specifically. Yeah, in the ranking system I made last summer with the North American teams, I did 100 days as well. Yeah, when I first created this rankings, I thought maybe I should do like a really shorter time period, like 75 days or something, because I feel with map picks, it's like it's more volatile, so you want to have a shorter time period. But when you think about it, teams, especially in this specific time period that I picked, like right now, over the last 100 days, there hasn't been as many tournaments as I would like because of the winter break and sort of, that month winter break and limited tournaments leading up to the major. So yeah, there's not a whole lot of results, and there's not like the amount of results on specific maps are gonna be less because within a best of 5, not like a map like Mirage or Cache is not gonna be picked every time, right? So it's like the sample size is even smaller. So that's why I actually bumped it up to 100 days. Because I thought, you want to include like actually a lot of results because you need it, because sometimes in these lesser played maps, they're not going to show up very often. So it's very hard to tell who's the best team in the world. And I thought with 100 days too, it'd also be like, I don't know if you can do this, if you actually think, if everyone listening to this recording is going to think about it this way. But if you go back in your head and you think, okay, what are the teams right now? What are their strengths? And how far back do I think results from that team are relevant to think about as I think about teams today? Like which results, how far back would you go? Like if you think about today, which tournament you think has become irrelevant to the strength of teams today? Do you think that Cloud9 winning ESL Pro League Season 4 is relevant to today? You think that somehow gives that sounds a good indication, or any indication, or a significant indication of Cloud9's strength today. I wouldn't count that. I wouldn't count IEM Oakland either. I think the last one, and this one's really borderline in my mind, but the last one I would count would probably be DreamHack Winner. So if I looked at that one, it was also with barely within the 100 days. So I felt like 100 days was really right for this list. But maybe if you did that gut check like I did just now, you'd only go, no, I wouldn't count DreamHack Winner. I'd only count from the E-League Season 2 playoffs onward. I think that's fairly reasonable. Maybe you think a result even far back as Northern Arena Toronto or ESL Cologne 2016 is valid. That's sort of way out there in my opinion, but it really does come down to the subjective sort of thing. Like, where do you think results become meaningless or less meaningful, or not worthy of consideration? I think they're around the 3-month mark. I know HLTV and Thorn are around that mark. HLTV might be 90 days or 3 months. I think they just do use 3 months, and Thorn uses 3 months. But yeah, I think 100 days just works for the way I'm thinking about it right now. But that one's the most subjective. I think there is the most subjective value you can change around. Yeah, in the comment section, you can let me know what you think is the most, or on Twitter, you can tweet me, what's the most ideal number of days or number of months to use. What's the relevant cutoff point. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on all those topics. There's a lot to think about with this, and yeah, I think at the end of the day, you have to always sort of admit that it's not going to be perfect. Oh, I guess I got a point to mention is in economics, when they talk about unemployment in the United States, there's the main measure of measuring unemployment, which is the one everyone mentions in the newspaper as the unemployment rate. So that's some number below 5 right now in the United States. But actually, there's a lot of ways to measure unemployment, because, so a person who's retired is technically unemployed, right? But you wouldn't want to count them. Persons who are long-time unemployed, hasn't had a job in 2 years, would you count them in the unemployment rate? Would you count them as a member of the workforce but unemployed? You would have to decide specific criteria, sort of like a ranking system, to whether or not you count someone as being a member of the workforce and unemployed, or just not a member of the workforce. And I think if you look into this at all, you'll see that the U6 measure of unemployment is the one that economists tend to favor, not the U3, which is sort of like the standard one that everyone talks about. It's sort of discussed when talking about politics and just general non-economic discussion. And the U6 actually, the way they count labor force participation is broader. So they have the unemployment rate a lot higher, like 10%. But you think, okay, there's these two numbers, under 5 and 10-ish, right? These are two drastically different things. How can they be? How can this be the same at all? Well, the thing is, it's what you're really looking at an unemployment rate is whether it ticks up or down. It's not whether or not the number itself is accurate. You're looking at the trend. And I think that's what's the good things about setting a system. If you have a consistent system, like a Thorin system or HLTV, it will show generally if a team's going up or down pretty accurately. It will, in its own sort of weird, messed up way, show, it will, imperfect, maybe not messed up way, if a team's getting better results or worse results completely accurately. And it'll accurately, well, not completely accurate, but it will pretty accurately show the trend, right? And I think and it's sort of give a consistent thing to fall back on. Are we better this month or last month in terms of the unemployment rate? Now, if you're going to do a very specific look, like there's this thing where if more people who are long time unemployed decide to send in a lot of job applications, they'll be added back into the labor force in the U3 measurement, or I guess in the U6 measurement as well, but it's more broad in the U6. But that's actually a good thing. But if that happens, like a lot of people who are a long time and unemployed come back in, the actual employment rate will go up, which is a bad thing. So what you have to do in that specific circumstance is look at the data, like the data collected via survey by the agency that tries to figure out the unemployment rate. Is that the BEA? I don't remember off the top of my head. So it's just like the rating system. It's about looking at the specific data points, but the system, the number, the measurement, gives you like an idea, and it gives you an idea of trends, and it's consistent. So you get sort of a broad idea by just looking at these specific numbers, like Fnatic +2 or VP -1 or whatever have you, or unemployment's gone up by 5% in the last year, or down 6.5%. Whatever numbers you want to use, right? It's useful as a measurement tool, even if what it's specifically measuring, even if that specific number, right, given by the unemployment rate or the ranking system is ultimately not accurate, right? Okay, that's the end of the recording. Thanks.